Welcome back to our show. I'm Alexa, your netball bestie, and together with Jenna, this is Your Netball BestieS. This is where we deep dive into SSN game analysis and what the netball world is currently talking about. We've just had an absolutely epic grand final showdown at Rod Laver in Melbourne, which the Vixens came out on top, winning by 1 goal in a very closely contested matchup. What an incredible way to farewell Simone McInnes after the rags to riches season the Vixens have had. We have a lot to break down about this game, as Jenna and I were both fortunate enough to be at the game in person in Melbourne. We're also going to give a roundup on who is currently signed where now that the signing period has officially started, and the very interesting breaking news around Lucy Austin's contract offer. We want to give a big thank you to everyone who listens every week and has supported this podcast so much. It has been such a fun ride growing this show with you all. As always, if you enjoy the show, please go and give us a 5-star rating on Spotify and share this show with your netball besties. But quickly, Jenna, have you heard about Fire Five?
I've seen a little bit on social media that is it a little tournament that Gretel Bueta is sort of spearheading with some of the retired players.
Yes. So Gretel and Maria Folau have brainstormed this brilliant idea, which what good timing as well, after we recently found out that Fire Five is going to be put on hold with the whole, international tournaments that are going to be seen every year soon. So what perfect timing for them. But yes, it is very similar to Fast Five in regards to the rules, but I'm actually going to be putting out a video today on Instagram and TikTok, which is going to break down what the rules are because there are some pretty unique aspects to it. I'm very excited to see all of these amazing retired netball players come together for this tournament. Yeah, it should be pretty good. I believe it is in November, and I know that I'm going, and it's going to be a lot of content for me to film around this, so I'm very, very excited. Definitely go and follow Fire Five on Instagram. I know that they've announced all of the team names and stuff as well, so, watch this space. First of all, before we deep dive into the grand final, we just want to touch on a couple of the things that we've seen on social media, just to essentially clarify that we are not going to be talking about them. And that is in regards to some of the negative discourse that we've seen back and forth between clubs and fan bases. So this is just something that we, are very open about. We're not supportive of any of that. We're all about like positive and, uplifting commentary around teams. Like, we've always said that again and again. So this is not something that we want to platform or put any more oxygen into. What are your thoughts on that, Jenna?
Yes, no, I think one thing that's really good about netball and each fan base for each club is that everyone is very passionate. And of course you do get your rivalries, but I think it's really important to keep things, respectful and just keep communication, positive. But yeah, there has been a bit of discourse online and, not necessarily what you want to see. There's other things that we can focus on instead.
Absolutely. And like you said, the word passion. We're all passionate netball fans, but I think passion is a very different to hatred. And I think that sometimes people need to understand which category perhaps they're leaning into, and maybe make better choices. It is funny. I was saying to you I do wonder sometimes about the psychology of colors and whether that, I don't know, influences how people feel about particular teams, because I feel like green of Fever sometimes just is like the cartoon villain of the green baddie. Whereas I wonder if the psychology would change if they went predominantly white dresses with green trim. You
Well, you
know,
never know. It could be a fun social experiment.
exactly, because there is a lot of psychology behind colors and how they make people feel.
Yeah, definitely.
We also wanted to touch on the umpiring because we know that there's been a lot of passionate discourse around the umpiring and decisions that were made, and obviously how much that can affect the outcome of a game. And personally, for me, I can absolutely see when this happens, but I think you'll agree with me, Jenna. We see it happen day in and day out across every sport, across every game, every season, because until AI takes over umpiring, we just have to accept that some calls are going to be wrong because they're done by humans. As a quick summary, I think that the Vixens overall did a lot of things right. At the end of the day, the Vixens won. They were consistent across the game. This was a fairly closely contested game, and this was, in our opinion, Fever's to lose, and unfortunately they did. So let's talk about what went wrong for Fever here, because quite a few things did. I think we saw that Fever's attacking mid-court specifically, was not their strongest. And this is credit to Vixen's defense and doing their homework on how to shut them down, specifically Jordan and Alice, who we saw, not have their strongest game, particularly, reflected in Alice Tignild's net points compared to the last time they matched up, which I think was about 50%. So they did a good job. That was definitely one of the weakest parts for Fever's game in this whole match. We also saw what I knew would be an issue. I think most people saw this would be an issue, is that Fever have been undefeated with no super shot strategy whatsoever. And yet they're going against a team who, and like they did, only needed to take a couple of super shots to get ahead. And so they're such closely contested teams in skill and consistency that all it takes is for Austin to be able to sink one super shot per quarter, and they've lost the game, and Fever have lost the game because they do not have a super shot strategy. And we will go into that into more detail. And unfortunately, the third reason I would say that Fever fell behind is when the decision was made to take Beckford off the court and bring Liv Wilkinson on. This has definitely been a choice that I think has puzzled a lot of Fever fans across the whole season. That we see even stat-wise, this is facts, not feelings. Stat-wise, Beckford has performed astronomically better than Liv Wilkinson across the season, even with similar to the exact same minutes on the court. We see consistently Beckford having high net points, and we see consistently Liv Wilkinson not having consistent high net points, and sometimes negative. So I think for a 21-year-old, with very little experience, to be brought on for the last half of a grand final was certainly a choice. We started off with a lot of nerves and turnovers between both teams. There was definitely a lot of silly errors and giving up ball. We saw a couple of early misses from Garben, but we later saw her really steady on her game. Fever's defense for me was the absolute standout for Fever overall. I think Sunday and Katie and Fran, all of them, but particularly Sunday, wow, what an incredible game that she had. And I think that she was almost, her and Katie were single-handedly keeping Fever in the game at this point. We saw them get so much tips and ball back, and then almost instantly that ball was lost in the Fever midcourt. And then we saw very early on Austin start to sink a super shot. And straight away, we knew that this was going to be a hard game because, as we've seen all season long, Fever do not have a strong super shot option. So Vixens won the first quarter 17-16. So we started the second quarter and there was really nothing in it. It was really just back and forth. It was extremely close. The super shots kept the Vixens' nose in the front at this point. It was definitely their secret weapon that Fever did not have an answer for. We saw beautiful plays from both defense and the shooting ends. Maloney and Zara, absolutely stunning play in that mid-attacking part of the court. They honestly, like Maloney, as always, such a standout. And I was really glad to see Zara get the start. Particularly, obviously, we love Mundy, but she has just come off an injury time, so I don't think anyone was expecting her to start or have a full 60 minutes, and I think Zara Walters is such a strong go-to option for them. I think this was also a real stark difference in the two teams in that attacking end, is how hard Fever were finding it to get past that transverse line and into the shooting third versus Vixens. It was a lot more stagnant for Fever, particularly in the second half. Halftime, it was 31-33 to Vixens, so Vixens also won that second quarter. So we started the third quarter and it was again goal for goal. We saw Mundy come on at the 8-minute mark. and then Fever make a change and bring Liv on at the 7 minute mark. This was the quarter where the Vixens were able to get up by 5, which was at this point the largest lead so far in the whole game. There were definitely a few questionable choices and silly passes that we saw. We saw a few offensive contacts, and the turnovers did unfortunately start to add up. The Vixens finished with a 5 goal lead at the end of the third quarter. So we started the fourth quarter and no changes to the Fever lineup from what we could see. Also, no changes from the Vixens, I believe. There was a timeout called at the 8 minute mark by Vixens, and they still had a 5 goal lead, which they'd been able to maintain. We saw a couple of slow releases around the circle edge by Liv, which was, definitely not the strongest play to make when you have defenders like Joe Weston and Rudy Ellis hovering around that area. We saw Liv take quite a few center passes and then immediately pass that back to Jordan instead of looking forward or looking to progress the game forward towards the post. We saw a lot of just passing back, driving forward into space with kind of no purpose to then sight Janelle or anyone on circle edge. It was just almost like creating unnecessary multiple passes in the third for kind of no reason, which I think is why we actually saw Alice Tignild take some high risk feeds into Janelle because there was just no one else coming forward to progress the ball into the circle. There was a moment where we actually saw Janelle have to come out of the circle and create play, which allowed Liv to drive into the circle under the post. And, it worked in that moment, but it certainly, I don't think, was what I would imagine their plan one strategy was. We saw Fever defense do, honestly, they could not have done more than what they did. They actually had such a solid game. They were getting the ball back, and then we just saw that real stagnation of being able to bring the ball into the shooting end again. But they did manage to get the score within 1 in the super shot time. This is how close this game was. So as we went into the final minutes of this game, Vixens really had no weak links on the court. They were strong in every single position. In the dying minutes, we saw a pass from Liv to Fowler when she was sandwiched by the 2 defenders, which unfortunately didn't have enough on it. So it was quite an easy intercept at a time when Fever desperately needed to get back into this game, and there was really only 1 in it. And with only 2 minutes left, the Vixens were up by 2 goals. Fever were forced to take super shots in the final minutes of this game, which is something that they are, not necessarily comfortable with doing. It has never been a strategy of them. We've only ever seen it happen if they have been up by a huge amount and they just start taking risks because it kind of doesn't matter. Or in this case, Fowler was positioning for a super shot because they desperately needed it. We actually saw Janelle get a 3rd attempt before getting the super shot. There were a couple of contact calls against the Vixen defenders. And then, of course, as we see Vixens do, game in and game out, they smartly play a possession game and waste time in the final minutes, knowing full well that if they do that, they are going to win the game. And that is exactly what we saw happen. And honestly, I have very little faults for Vixens. I actually think they themselves performed really, really well. And it was Fever that perhaps didn't perform at the level that we would ordinarily expect them. As you can expect, the Melbourne fan base, the Vixens fans at Rod Laver were absolutely ecstatic. This was huge, especially for, a home game for them. It was really such an atmosphere to be amongst. Although I was wearing green and going for Fever, it was still, an incredible atmosphere to be in when, you just see so much joy and happiness, because at the end of the day, the Vixens did play the better game on the day. And we've really seen them just completely solidify their entire strategy and gameplay throughout the second half of this season. And they were clearly deserving of it. Jenna, I know that this was definitely an emotional hit for you as we were there. It was hard to watch. I know that you're very emotionally invested in the Fever girls. So how do you feel?
No, I think you're right in saying, I think Vixens did deserve that win. They went out there, they were able to execute their game plan. Everyone firing, everyone did their job right, and they just did the basics right. And sometimes all it comes down to is just doing the basics right. So they were able to go out there and do that. And I think as well, probably having the passion and, majority of the crowd on their side definitely would have helped, help them feel inspired. And, they were also, playing for Simone's last game. So there was a lot of heart in it. And I think it was very obvious about the heart that they had in it while they were playing. I also think as well, the Vixens have a lot of experience in finals as well. I mean, we've seen the past 2 weeks them pull off some incredible 1 point wins. That seems to be their number the past couple of games, and they were able to then execute that again. So I think credit to them for that. I think, yeah, you could tell when you look at the lineup of Vixens, you have a lot of very experienced and seasoned players in that side. Whereas in the Fever side, our mid court is like, especially with like Jordan Kranzberg and Liv and Zoe and that, I think maybe the pressure did get to them a little bit. And, grand finals, the stakes are high. There's a lot on the line for both sides. So, I think we saw, Jordan just a little bit off. And so there were definitely some decisions, like you said, that I do think were really interesting. And like there were changes that I would have liked to be made. I think even if we had saw Jess come into center to sort of bring a bit of stability, put your captain in there, I think her versus Maloney would have been really good, and maybe what it would have inspired something. I think Shanice coming on in there to sort of move the mid court through, I think would have been an option. So yeah, I think. But at the end of the day, someone's got to win, someone's got to lose, and Vixens were the team that showed up and got it done.
We are going to be, starting the international comps very soon. We have our Diamonds team all, ready and raring to go to face up against South Africa. So, given how we've seen our, predominantly starting Diamonds shooting end perform recently, how confident are you feeling going into, the next couple of internationals?
I think it's definitely reassuring now seeing that our Diamonds girls are, locked and loaded. And I'm sure coming off the back of a premiership will probably help keep that spark going onwards and upwards as always next year. It's just, it's the nature of sport. You win some, you lose some. What can you do?
Speaking of looking forward to, next season, let's talk about the signings because this is going to be a little bit of, grenades going off. We've already seen some huge changes, and I'm going to swing to you, Jenna, in a moment to touch on the biggest changes that we've seen in regards to farewells and also signings. And then also we're going to touch on what is going on with Lucy Austin and her contract. So, Jenna, can you fill us in?
Yeah, so for the Adelaide Thunderbirds, we have the current squad is Tilly Garrett, Georgie Horges, Shamira Sterling, who's expected to return from maternity leave, Taylor Williams and Latanya Wilson. But the outs for this season are Romelda Aiken-George, who announced her retirement, Hannah Petty, who also announced her retirement, which I think caught a lot of people off guard. San Marie Visser not re-signed, but obviously we know that Shamira is expected to be back. And then Lucy Austin, which news broke today that she hasn't accepted a contract, which they worded very intentionally.
What are your predictions on that?
To be honest, I think good on Lucy because, she was a part of the club. To be in that environment and to not be looked on, clearly Tanya didn't think that, necessarily that maybe it was in her opinion, the best decision to sort of let her have a crack on court, especially behind Romelda Aiken, being pretty consistent for the most part. To not even bench warm, but to sit in this grandstand and watch your team play pretty much almost every single game this season. I think it would be hard, at the end of the day, these youngsters, they want to play. They're there because they're passionate, they love the sport, and they want to play. So, of course, if someone's offering, you an opportunity to play, why would you not take it? So, it could be a good decision. I think getting some more consistent court time would be good for her especially because now she has been out of the SSN environment for so long. So I think good on her for making the decision in her best interest. But I did think it was very interesting the way that it was worded, that she's decided to not take a contract that we were going to offer her.
Yeah. I'm sure they probably expected that as soon as Romelda retired, that they would just fill that spot with Lucy.
Yes, so that will be interesting. So I'm curious as well whether or not we may see some whether they'll go to for homegrown talent or if they will be looking overseas.
I just want to quickly touch on headlines for articles that, you might see floating around. I think most people are aware enough how journalism works and headlines, but unfortunately not everyone is, and they believe everything that they read. It is important to remember that a journalist's job, a lot of the time, not always, is to find an angle. So that is their job. They need to make a clickable angle and a headline that grabs attention. That is literally their job and what they're told to do. So they will fabricate anything out of nothing. It's like, so in regards to if you are seeing headlines around perhaps what a Fever player said or didn't say, just always take everything with a grain of salt, because that journalist would have been told to make a headline happen. And sometimes they literally just rewrite reality in order to get the clicks. So I just want everyone to keep that in mind. Also, specifically, I saw that there is a fake club account making headlines and completely fabricating quotes that players have said, which is literally complete and utter BS. So I just ask everyone to, keep your wits around you when you're seeing this stuff floating around social media. I know AI is going to be a huge problem soon, but, people making up BS has always been something that people have done to push an agenda. So, just keep that at the forefront of your mind when you're reading things online.
So for Giants, we have the outs is Julie Fitzgerald, who has retired. Joe Harton's retiring. And then Jamie Lee Price, who requested to be released from her contract, which was granted. So we know that she'll be heading to one of the Melbourne teams, most likely probably Mavs, I would say.
Yeah.
And the current confirmed squad for next year are Sophie Dwyer, Erin O'Brien, Amy Slager, Jodie Ann Ward, and Hope White. They still haven't named a replacement coach yet, so that will be interesting to see whether or not they have a say in the recruitment process, or it might be something that a board necessarily might want to decide. For Melbourne Mavericks, we have a confirmed squad of Kim Brown, Shimona Jock, Molly Jovic, and Amy Parmenter. And the outs are Elle Cardwell, who will be returning to England, back to the NSL League. Not quite sure what team yet. And Liv Lewis, who has decided to pursue a career in AFLW. Also with Mavericks, we saw that it was announced that Nicole Richardson has signed on as assistant coach for Mavericks. But as far as we knew as well, Tracy Neville's contract was up for re-signing as well. And it's very interesting to me to have the assistant coach announced and confirmed for next year before the head coach. So I wonder if maybe it's something brewing.
I guess it confirms that Richo won't be going over to head the Vixens, though.
Yes, definitely. For Melbourne Vixens, we obviously have the out of their coach, Simone McInnes. New coach to be confirmed.
Rumor mill is very much it's going to be Kathy Fellows, isn't it?
Potentially. Yes, maybe. They did want a homegrown coach. Vixens are definitely the quietest one. They like to keep their contract lengths very undercover, but honestly would not be expecting any changes from Vixens. I'd say that pretty confidently. I don't think we'll see much change. And then with the Swifts, the confirmed squad that we have is Paige Hadley, Helen Housby, Sarah Clout, Maddie Proud, who'll be coming back from maternity leave, and Maddie Turner. And we haven't really heard much else other than that. I think there's a big question mark around whether Grace Becky will return. I haven't
seen a question mark around Grace returning. I thought she'd be a shoo-in.
No, as in people aren't sure now if she will go back. She was off contract this year.
Surely you wouldn't want to go back to what I imagine is a significant pay cut.
Yes, which the ANZ did announce that there would be an even further significant pay cut. So, but yeah, I think I am expecting her to stay in SSN, especially now with the eligibility changing. I don't see why you wouldn't. To be confirmed, we've not heard anything about that.
Still a lot of speculation flying around in regards to those comments that Helen Housby made at the end of their last game. No one seems to want to let that go.
Queensland Firebirds, we have a confirmed squad of Imogen Allison, Ruby Bakewell-Doran, Mary Trollope, and Macy Gardner, and they have extended their coach's contract all the way to 2027, which is interesting. What hand she'll have in this new contract, because Firebirds are in desperate need of a rebuild.
Yes, they are. And it's interesting, we've already talked about Veve's unique situation at the moment, but I've had a couple of messages around it as well, because I think everyone is, I guess, confused or just wanting to know if there is any support system for or financial support for players in her situation. And I think, as far as I know, and what we talked about, Jenna, is unfortunately it's just a nature of the beast as an athlete to be so severely injured when you're out of contract.
Yeah.
It sucks basically.
Yeah, so unfortunately, it looks like she's in a bit of a tough spot, but hopefully, she can come back stronger than better than ever, which I have no doubt. And then for Sunshine Coast Lightning, we have a confirmed squad of Courtney Bruce, Ash Irvin, Cara Conan, and Liz Watson. So you can be assured Belinda wanted to lock those diamonds in. And we have yet to see who else will be in.
It's going to be Steph, obviously. Steph's not going anywhere. Okay, she's made it clear. She's said on mic, okay, that she's coming back. She's got a lot more to give. So, yeah, I'm fully expecting that they're just negotiating a good contract for her.
And then for the West Coast Fever, we have a confirmed squad of Jess Ansys, Sunday Ariang, Jordan Kransberg, Alice Tignild, and Olivia Wilkinson. I know that there hasn't been a lot of discussions on whether or not Zoe Kransberg and possibly Fran Williams might be on the lookout for clubs for more court time, which I think if you were looking for some consistent players, I think they are definitely ones to approach. I think they're very good within their own right, and Fever have so much depth. But also we have possibly Ruth Ariang who might come back as well to Fever. So I'd be curious to see what their next steps are. But I do think one thing that has been proven sort of time and time again now is Fever's desperate need for a specialist 2-point shooter. It feels like almost everyone has one and we don't. And I think we're getting to these pressured moments where it is becoming detrimental and leading to some unfortunate losses. So I think we really need to get someone in there that's, bring Gabby Sinclair back. I still think she'd be fab.
Oh, I am 100% behind you on that. I would love to have Gabby Sinclair in green, amongst the Fever. She would be such an incredible find because that's exactly it. What we've been missing since Sasha moved over to Mavericks was having that super shot option available, and that gap in the strategy has been so obviously highlighted. It's also important to note that some of these contracts weren't just offered recently. They actually are just pre-existing contracts
Mm.
that have just extended over this period of time. That's it from us, but we will be back to round up the Diamonds versus South Africa games, which is just around the corner, closely followed by the Constellation Cup with New Zealand. Thank you so much for being on this SSN podcast journey with us for our very first season. And please give us a 5-star rating on Spotify if you have enjoyed the show, and we will be chatting with you very soon.